record buttons. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Twa Auld Heids. We don't have a guest tonight, so it's just me and Silver Fox, Mike Vennick, having a wee discussion for you. And we're going to discuss some quite difficult topics, because this is one where we don't necessarily see things the same way. Over to you, Mike.
Quite often we've said, Dave, when we've had guests on, and the kind of, before we record anything, we've made sure they know that you and I don't always agree on everything. And tonight's an example of it. You want to go on the subject of sovereignty, which is fine by me, because it's what I've been yet or not about all the way through everything we've done. But I want to go on another subject, but I'm going to give you your head. You win tonight. Sovereignty, over to you, my friend.
Okay. Basically, everybody's got a different idea about what sovereignty is. We talk about it a lot, but everybody's got a different idea about what it actually is. So I'm going to give you, first of all, dictionary definition. Sovereignty, supreme power or authority. Similar as jurisdiction, supremacy, dominion, power, ascendancy, etc. The opposites of sovereignty. The opposites of sovereignty are hegemony, colonialism, etc. Now, basically, that's the dictionary definition. What I have here is an excerpt of a letter that was done by Kofi Annan, who was the UN General Secretary. And this was done on the 18th of September 1999. And it's called Two Concepts of Sovereignty. And these excerpts are as follows. As heads of state and government gather in New York for the annual session of the UN General Assembly, Kofi Annan, the UN General Secretary, gives us his thoughts on international intervention in humanitarian crises and the changes needed for the next century. State sovereignty, in its most basic sense, is being defined, not least by the forces of globalisation and international cooperation. States are now widely understood to be instruments at the service of their peoples and not vice versa. At the same time, individual sovereignty, by which I mean the fundamental freedom of each individual, enshrined in the Charter of the UN and subsequent international treaties, has been enhanced by a renewed and spreading consciousness of individual rights. When we read the Charter today, we're more than ever conscious that its aim is to protect individual human beings, not to protect those who abuse them. That's 20 years ago. And basically, at the end of the day, the UN are coming round to an idea that Scotland first espoused in 1320 at the Abbey of Arbroath, in the Declaration of Arbroath. We're going to have a wee discussion tonight about how the people, the Scottish people, have more rights to do things that the Scottish Parliament or the MSPs or indeed the MPs do not, or at least as far as the MSPs do not, because they are actually under the auspices or under the jurisdiction of the Scotland Act, which was then given by Westminster. But it does not affect the sovereignty of the Scottish people.
That was the point, Dave, if I can follow on from that I was trying to, it's the point I've stressed all the way through this, that everyone who is in the Yes movement recognises that the people are sovereign. What I've never yet seen, is the power being exercised that gives every single individual. Because it's why I started the idea of currency, whereby it's why I walked into the Parliament with a bottle full of coins and saying, this is a central bank. It wasn't set up by the government. It wasn't set up by the Parliament. It was set up by individual people that I spoke to. It's still their money, Dave. That is the point. It's not under anyone else's control. David McGuinness, Indie Truck Davy, made a comment. It was in one of his talks, and it was just a comment he made in the passing. And he said that the Central Bank of Scotland, once we've established independence, cannot be other than a public bank. And he made reference to the Fed Bank in the USA, which is a private bank. He made reference to the Bank of England, ? Which is a private bank. It may be independent, but it's private. And that is not how we're going to do it. Now, the only way that can be done is if individual people in Scotland, not the Parliament, actually indicate that's what their desire is, that's what they want to happen. And that comes from exercising the power of individuals who are sovereign. Couldn't agree with you more. That's why I want to say, Boris, you can tell Nicola whatever you like, but you can't tell me. I'm sorry, my friend.
Exactly. It takes you back to some of the other conversations that we've had with Chris McKelney and Jim Fairley about the power that we as the people actually have compared to the limited power that Parliament has. And basically, over the last couple of days, you'll all have seen that there's going to be a new raid on Holyrood Powers with the UK single market. Have you ever heard such a piling of nonsense in all your life? It's like they say that we're actually part of this unitary state that they have, and yet they're enforcing a single market across different parts of it, in the way that they look at things. And as far as that's concerned, they can close Parliament if they like. I mean, they can completely say, right, okay, we've had enough of the Scotland Act, we're going to abolish it. And if they do, nothing changes. Nothing changes. Our sovereignty still belongs to the people, because at the end of the day, we never ever give it away. You can't give it away. You're born to take custodianship of it, and you die and pass it on to somebody else.
People watching this, Dave, may get the impression that although you and I disagree on certain things, there's one thing we agree on, and you've just praised it. Listen, you get a bit of criticism earlier on today in one of your posts, that something you were saying about the inquiry and what's going to happen as a result of it wasn't helping the solidarity of the Yes movement.
Yeah.
Can I take that as a theme just for a wee while?
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you a group of names that the Yes movement, I hope, will recognise why I've grouped them. I'm going to start with the first group: Alan Smith, Pete Wishart, John Swinney, Kirsten Oswald, David Pratt, Angus Robertson, and Tommy Shepherd. What do they have in common just in the recent, last 2 weeks, Davy?
They've all basically had different ideas about how we're going to have independence at some point in the future, and not a single one of them's actually said a single thing about how they're going to do it, apart from the airy-fairy thing that the EU were going to basically jump into Pete Wishart's idea and make everything okay, to which the EU instantly said, oh, no or no.
Let me give you a second group, right? George Caravan, Joanna Cherry, and particularly Kenny McCaskill. What's common amongst them?
They're causing a bit of a stushy just now by doing things that don't appear to be strictly along the party line. The party discipline that the SNP seems to have broken down a little bit. But well, I think I've got a pretty good idea why all that is happening, which may have something to do with the article that appeared today in the Sunday Post.
See, why I did that is to backtrack on the fact that you were getting stuck for causing division. Mm-hmm. That division already exists.
Yeah.
It maybe hasn't been as apparent as it is now, and it's got an awful lot to do with you wanted to deal with sovereignty, and I'm happy with that. What I hope will come out of this is we'll discuss the who, the when, and the how. Point you just made is everyone's talking about, if we do it this way, we can deliver independence.
Yes.
But no one is saying how. Is it going to be UDI? Is it going to be Section 30? Is it going to be the ideas that Chris McKelney was expounding on when we did the interview with him? Is it something along the lines of Jim Fairley? To try and get to the bottom of that, and I've already prepped you for this coming, so you know what's coming at the moment. I don't want to talk about what's happening just now. I want everyone that watches this to think forward and to think that it's Hogmanay, 31st of December 2020. What will happen between now and that date that will gain Scotland its independence? Example, as per today on the Mars show, will Nicola saying, look, I've got to concentrate on COVID, it's got worse during the winter. I can't deal with questions to do with when we're going to have an independence referendum. This is too serious.
She didn't just
Might
say
that
that.
be where we are?
She didn't just say that. She also said the economic outfall for COVID, which could be another 20 years.
Will Alex Salmond have appeared by the end of this year?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's why I want people to think ahead, because when we did the meeting with the Yes groups, Ali from Butterflies Rising gave us some very, very good advice. She said, look, if you're going to have a project, you've got to define what it is, and you've got to have a time scale. You've got to say it will be achieved by that time. And that, to me, is the essence of the problem we have at the moment. Everyone is talking and using phrases like deliver independence. They're talking about, well, if we do well next May, then it could be 2022. I'm looking at the promise that was made that a referendum would take place in 2020. And I'm hoping part of the discussions we are having, Dave, will start getting people focused on that. How do we achieve that? How do we actually make sure by the end of this year? I'm going to chuck something up on the screen, Dave, if I can. 3 days ago, the European Union issued a document which says everyone's going to have to be prepared for the 31st of December 2020, because the day after, irrespective of what is agreed with the UK or nothing is agreed with the UK, certain things are going to happen and everyone needs to get prepared. Now, they dealt with trade, business, financial services. I'm going to relate this just to people and what's happening. Give me a second. I hope to pop it up on the screen. As of the 1st of January 2021, UK nationals travelling to the European and the Schengen area will be treated as third country nationals. I won't read any more. I'll just let that stay on the screen for a while. Different ball game to what we've been used to since we've been in the EU. Have you seen Michael Gove or anyone from the UK government starting to explain and prepare for this? Tell us how it's going to go? They're also talking under the second paragraph there, there will not be the same extensive cross-border social security protection. For instance, whether or not you get health rights, whether you've got pension benefits coming from the EU or vice versa. All of that is actually going to happen.
Yep.
I had a discussion with someone, everyone will know, I'm not going to use the person's name, but the point that came out of that is, are even the Scottish government preparing properly for what's going to happen? I'm not sure at the moment. If that is true, and someone can criticise me for even raising that, I'll ask this question. The Growth Commission is now dead. It was written for a past era, with Brexit coming up, with the COVID thing coming up, with jobs being destroyed right, left and centre. Everything that was in that Growth Commission document needs to be completely revised. The day after independence, is anyone preparing for the substance we need? And the person I was speaking to made the comment that independence comes in stages. Stage one might be we've gained our independence as a country, but we're then into negotiations. 5 million of us against 50 million and a state that did not want to see us become independent. Who is preparing for that? The best I've seen is, and trying to do some of the preparation, is Commonweal.
Yeah.
But that's Commonweal on their own, and they're not being listened to, as I understand it. I'll switch that off, Dave, and come back to the discussion with you. My point is, if all of that is part of the agenda, we can't wait until the 31st of December this year to start having absolutely substantial discussions about how we achieve that. And for me, it starts with the SNP conference in October. Chris is going to try and take his ideas forward. Jim Fairley's going to try and take his ideas forward. And this is where I'll link back into where you started. The Yes movement, the sovereign people of Scotland have got to try and influence that.
Yep.
We've got the list indie parties appearing. ISP's already up and running. Does their current manifesto include something along the lines of how they'll deal with these problems? The Alliance is about to launch. Too early to say what will be in their prospectus. But we had Pat Lee on in the discussion, and I asked Pat, if we come to some kind of common wording, common understanding, very, very important in my opinion, and it's something I posted on, and I'll shut up in a second. If it's the sovereign will of the Scottish people that leads to a prospectus that the parties then adopt, it's not a collaboration between the parties which could come under the scrutiny of the Electoral Commission.
It's an instruction.
It's the sovereign will of the Scottish people that is dictating what should happen in our country and for our people. Zip.
I can't argue with you there. At the end of the day, I mean, I think that there's a few people have actually. In fact, I think it was an article that Chris McKelney had again in the National, where he actually stated that that should be that or similar wording should actually be part of the SNP manifesto, and I believe if the SNP adopts something like that, which is another big thing as well. Because like they don't like people trying to influence anything at all. It doesn't go through their own party structure, which means that they control it, and they cannot stand the Yes movement interfering with the party. I mean, they just can't stand it.
You see, when the criticism was on your post that says you were dividing things, what I've tried to do in giving you the names that I divided, is that division already exists.
Well, absolutely.
For this country to get its independence, that's where the sovereign people must come into it, because we're not divided. You go on a march, you shout the question, what do you want? There's one answer. When do you want it? There's one answer. There's no division in that, Dave. The reason I said the who, take anything, whether it's Section 30, whether it's UDI, who do I think will be the person that declares that? When we talk about the when is that going to be declared by whoever that is? And then you talk about the how. That's why I stress the how. If no one tells me how they're going to do it, it comes back to the sovereign people making that decision. We've got to try and work out how best we go forward. And that's where the background material comes in. There's some very, very... The Unionists and Brexit people were very, very clever in picking a phrase, take back control, to encourage people to understand what we're doing. We've got to find a phrase of that type. But that's way up in the peripheral part of that. That's just kidology. It's like the red bus. Once it's got, it's like the vow. Once it's said, okay, we've heard it, it disappears like snow off a dike. There's then got to be some very substantial work, and I'm hoping some of the stuff, now that we've got a bit more flexibility, some of the stuff I've done about currency or the Freedom Bill or whatever else, I can get moving again and start speaking to people and show what I'm trying to do. But at the end of the day, I come down to the fact that, how will I put this? I changed my thing from Project Fear, you know this. Then it became Hope Over Fear, and I said it's now got to be action over hope. And that's what I'm hoping will happen within the Yes movement, is that they'll realise there's timescales to this, exactly as Ali talked about, and the time is running out, and we've got to come together as a Yes movement. There's going to be division caused by the inquiry. The committee that's running the inquiry will start in less than, I think, 3 weeks. stuff's going to come. You've seen the letters that have gone out to the various people involved in that. It's quite scary what might come out of that, Dave.
Well, when I saw the letters, when I saw the letters, who they were, and the things that the letters were demanding each person that was being invited to go, I knew instantly what they were after, and they're after deep. Now, okay, the references, the scope of the inquiry doesn't actually count the criminal trial, but there's evidence that was laid in that criminal trial which is pertinent to the parliamentary inquiry. I don't know if it was in the civil case at all, but it doesn't matter, because the point is that the information itself is relevant to the inquiry. And for anybody that sat in that court, you can see it as plain as the nose in your face. If Craig Murray looked at those letters, he would know exactly what they were after. If Mark Hurst looked at those letters, he would know exactly what they're after. And as I say, it was so obvious. And if everybody out there actually knew the names that I know, and saw the letters, they would know as well. Which is basically another reason that when I say things about the SNP are going to take a hammering, the SNP are going to take a hammering. And the one thing I can say is that Mr. Ian McCann, second in charge of the SNP, is Peter Murrell's enforcer. Basically, Peter Murrell says, do this, and Ian McCann makes sure that they do. Ian McCann was called a prosecution witness. And it was part of a statement that I actually saw in court, that he actually said that people should sit back, hold back on an attempted rape allegation in case they could use it for political advantage. And that would never have been said without Peter Murrell's okay. And that's
are you clear we can say that?
Yes, absolutely, because basically he was going to get called as a witness. Eventually the prosecution didn't call him because the woman had already ruined their case for him, and ended up not getting called. But
okay, don't go too far.
Right, no, okay.
That is going to be another. That's why I keep going to the end of the year.
Yeah. Because
we'll have to live through all that going on, Dave.
Yeah.
The mainstream media, okay, are going to have an absolute field day.
It's going to be blood-based.
Whilst all that is going on, and somehow or other, the yes movement has to stay coherent.
Yeah.
Because my own reckoning is that something has got to happen this year. I go back to the fact that there was meant to be a referendum in 2020.
Yep.
That still, in my head, is where I would like to see us happen. But who does it, how it happens, is going to have to go over that bumpy ground. I mean, it's going to be up and down like nobody's business every single day, whether it's the BBC, whether it's Sun, whether it's the Daily Record, whether it's Scotsman, Herald, whatever, are going to be saying, look at independence tearing itself apart. That must not be the message that comes over. Independence is what we're talking about, and the yes movement's got to keep that very firmly in its mind, no matter what gets thrown out about other people.
Well, absolutely. If you look at it this way, the way I see it is, the yes movement is broad a church as you can possibly get. There are a lot of people in the yes movement. The only thing I have in common with them, and the only thing I actually like about them, and hate everything else, is the fact that they're going to vote yes. They've got no relevance to my existence in any other way at all, and I would have nothing to do with them in real life, but the fact that they vote yes. And there's a lot of people I wouldn't. But the point is, there's a lot of people I would. So
I'm just worried you're talking about me at the moment.
You'll see if I'm talking to you on January the 1st. No, but that's the thing with the yes movement. It all comes back to the fact the thing that unites us is the policy of independence, and most of us can put every other thing behind us for that thing. So the yes movement will regroup after the shock that hits in September.
Right, I'm deliberately going to mention something here when we're talking about sovereignty, and seeing that power exercised by individual after individual coming together as a collective sovereignty is the covenant, and the digital covenant.
Yep.
You and I know that we've got other guests that we're hoping to bring on. Without getting into that, you and I know we've got another show lined up for the tail end of this week to maybe come out on Saturday, where we're going to mention the Covenant. I hope everyone will watch when that programme comes on. It's probably the biggest thing every single individual in Scotland can take part in.
Yep.
I'll not say any more. That's just my teaser for another show, Dave.
Well, I'll just like to add a wee bit on it. Basically, when we're talking about all the things that can possibly go wrong, let's assume that every single one of them goes wrong. Let's assume that there's a mass catastrophe and all the politicians get wiped out in a tsunami that's happening in September, and there's not a single one left in the whole country. The bottom line is, for the Covenant, you don't need a single one. All you need is the people.
It takes you back to what Kofi Annan was talking about.
Yeah.
Is the United Nations, which represents all the countries that currently exist, recognises the individual sovereignty of one individual person.
Yep. And we have a historical record of it going back to 1320.
Yeah. My friend, we agreed we'd just do a chat and try and cover some of the things that you and I have been talking about in private.
Yep.
I'm basically finished.
It's going to be a short show this week then.
That's, well, quality rather than quantity, Mr. Llewellyn.
Right, but I would say to anybody that's watching, make sure that you tune in next week, because we're going to throw a couple of wee things in the water and see how far the ripples go, because we're going to show you one way of being able to flex your sovereignty muscles in a way that you probably never have before. And it hasn't been done. It hasn't been done since the 1950s. But we're walking in the footsteps of giants in this one. The difference is that this time we're in a new world where our sovereignty is accepted, except for the people who basically are saying that their parliament is sovereign. But it's not, as a High Court judge said in 1953. Parliamentary sovereignty has no relevance at all in Scots law. Okay, we've got when this broadcast is finished, don't disappear, because we're going to be putting a wee hint about what's going to be happening next week and the guests that we're going to have, and give you an idea about what we're trying to do and set up with a lot of people to help you flex your sovereign muscles.
Yeah, if you want to be an individual sovereign Scot, watch what's about to appear. Wait till the show appears with two guests. They appear in this clip. You're now invited. Every single city and town in Scotland. Details to follow.
Thanks very much for tuning in, guys. Good to talk again, Mike.
See you soon, Dave.
Bye.
Grand piano. Reed and pipe organ. Glockenspiel. Bass guitar. Vocal cords. Two slightly sampled electric guitars. The Venetian effect. Digital sound processor. And tubular bells.